All right, we're live.
Welcome, everyone, to today's presentation. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sheila Lewis, and I'm Chair of Social Action for the Baton Rouge Sigma Alumni Chapter. Today, in partnership with the NAACP, we will present to the community the impact of the recent crime bills on African American men. Our chaplain, Sharon Sims, will now engage us in a prayer. Sharon?
Thank you, Sarah Lewis. Let us bow our heads in prayer. God, we thank you for the opportunity and the ability to gather this evening as we discuss the impact of the recent crime bills on African American males. We are thankful that you are a sovereign God and that we don't have to elect you. You don't have to campaign for an office, but we thank you that you alone are God, and we acknowledge that you are in control of all mankind. God, make visible the breakthrough that we may see it today regarding the laws and other social issues that affect our communities. The breakthrough of hope, the breakthrough of change, the breakthrough of peace, the breakthrough of possibilities, the breakthrough of the Holy Spirit manifesting within each of us and in our communities. Help us, God, to move forward. Help us to impact the world rather than the world change us. And let us be the change agents for such a time as this. Now let the words of our mouths this evening and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, oh God. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you so much for that beautiful prayer. At this time, it gives me great privilege to introduce the president of Baton Rouge Sigma Alumni Chapter, Dr. Ernest Singleton. Dr. Singleton.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this evening's webinar. On behalf of the 300 plus members of the Baton Rouge Sigma Alumni Chapter, I want to welcome you. Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated keeps its pulse on what is occurring nationally, statewide, and locally. We, the members of Baton Rouge Sigma, do the same and encourage you to do the same as well. In early February, we held a webinar focused on redistricting, closed primaries, and crime. That was ahead of the special legislative session on crime. Now we are back to focus on the results of that particular legislative session, its impact. I encourage you to communicate with us in the chat on Zoom, Facebook, and YouTube. Let us know your thoughts as you listen to the panelists this evening. We hope that you find this presentation informing, you are ignited, and we implore you to stay involved in the political process. Now I want to introduce our webinar moderator this evening, Ms. Pamela Whitley. She is a retired federal executive who currently serves as the president and CEO of the consulting firm, the Edgewood Group, LLC. Prior to retiring in 2021, Mrs. Whitley served as the assistant administrator for NextGen, where she provided strategic direction for over 900 federal employees and oversight of over $2 billion annual budget. She was instrumental in the development of key aviation technology programs and research that makes flying safer. She holds a BS degree in electrical engineering from Southern University and an executive leadership certificate from Harvard Kennedy School of Government. Mrs. Whitley serves on various boards and is an active member of Baton Rouge Sigma Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta. Ladies and gentlemen, Mrs. Whitley.
Well, thank you, Sarah Singleton, for introducing me to this virtual audience this evening. It is both an honor and a pleasure to spend time with this collective group of panelists. Tonight, we have with us Chief Judge Don Johnson, Dr. Claire Norris, Attorney Dandris Lanus, and Representative Larry Selder. Thank you all for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Tonight, we will have a much needed dialogue using the topic, What's Next? The impact of the 2024 Louisiana crime bills on African American men. On March 5th, ABC News reported on the new crime bills passed in Louisiana. To quote the article, it stated, Louisiana on Tuesday became one of the toughest states in the nation on crime when Governor Jeff Landry signed a series of bills that will keep criminals in prison longer, enable citizens to carry guns without a permit, and resurrects the electric chair and adds nitrogen gas to lethal injections as methods used to execute death row inmates. While we could spend hours debating the details of the new laws, the legislative process was the proper place for that debate. In a political climate of a supermajority, where one party controls the House, the Senate, and the governorship, sometimes the debate is one-sided. That actually could be another forum in and of itself. But tonight, we want to focus on what's next. Now that the laws are on the books, we have to focus on what they mean to our everyday lives. Where do we go from here? So let's start with the common ground. And that is, we all want to keep our families and our neighborhoods safe. How we do that becomes the center of the ongoing debate. As we begin tonight's panel, I will ask each of these distinguished panelists to tell you a little bit about themselves. And I will also ask them to provide us just a little advice that they would share with young African-American males to increase their individual knowledge of these tough laws and what they mean to them. Panelists, I'm going to ask you to be brief because we have a lot to talk about tonight. So I will start with Chief Judge Johnson. If you tell us who you are and what you have to share with young men, that'll open us up for tonight.
Very well. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm at the courthouse at the 19th Judicial District Court. We're the state court for Louisiana in Baton Rouge. I'm an alumni of Southern University. I left Southern University in 1977 with a Bachelor's of Science degree in mechanical engineering. I worked in that field for a couple of years, and then I went to law school at LSU, and I graduated from LSU with a Juris Doctorate degree in 1982. And I practiced law both as a prosecutor and defense attorney for about 10 years, and after that, I was elected to serve on the City Court of Baton Rouge. I stayed there for about 6.5 years, and then I got fortunate enough to get elected to serve on the District Court, which is where I am now. I've been here for the past 23, 24 years, basically serving on all of the various types of courts we have. We have a lot of specialty courts now here, such as a drug court. We will start our domestic violence felony court in a week or so. We also have a veterans treatment court, and we have a pretrial court also. So that's basically what I've been doing. I have advanced degrees in other areas such as criminal justice, criminology, administration of criminal justice, and advance of the law degree. So I'm familiar with theories of crimes and theories of criminal justice. And I'm somewhat, I believe, an expert in trying to describe what we're facing and what we're challenging with. The best advice I can give our young people is this. The law on the books can be as tough as it can be. It will never be applied to me if I control my behavior. I don't care how tough the laws are. I will never be subject to those laws unless I'm involved in activity that's regulated as criminal. So, simply put, my advice is self-control at the highest level. We never have to concern ourselves with the application of any criminal law to our conduct. So that's what I'm stressing as best advice, self-control.
Chief Judge, thank you. Great advice. Self-control, I think, is a good place to start. Dr. Norris, I think you can both hear and talk at this point. I know you were having some challenges earlier. Confirm that you are good to go?
I believe I'm good to go.
Okay, so I will ask you to introduce yourself and share your words of wisdom as you see the landscape today as well.
Thank you very much. And thank you guys for having me today. I'm Claire Norris, and I serve as the Vice President for Advancement at the University of Louisiana system. I've been at the system for 6 years now. The honeymoon phases are over. And for those of you who don't know what the system is, that the University of Louisiana system, it's 9 institutions distinct in their own right. We have Grambling State University, Louisiana Tech, McNeese State University, Nicholls State University, Northwestern State University, Southeastern Louisiana University, UL Lafayette, UL Monroe, and the University of New Orleans. We serve over 80,000 students. We graduate over 16,000 students annually. I have a husband and 2 children, all whom I adore. My husband is a police officer, and I have 2 teenage/adult children. And so you can imagine we have a lot of conversations about criminal justice in our household. My background is in sociology. And so, these topics are not only personally close to me, but also professionally close to me. I will tell you guys, if I had to offer any advice, I would approach it for young men, the advice I'd give my own children. And that is, Elijah Anderson, a sociologist, wrote about the concept of being streetwise. And you hear it also echoed in W.E. Du Bois's work, where he talks about dual consciousness, which is so important. And so understanding where you're at and your surroundings, but also making sure that you're not an unnecessary casualty, making sure that you're aware of when, the environment shifts and changes, how to interact properly. And I want to be careful here that it's not certainly blaming the victim, because sometimes you can just be in your home and things happen. But I would tell my children to understand their environment, understand when to be streetwise, understand the dual consciousness of navigating this world we live in today.
Great advice. Thank you. And I'm sure you have some very active dialogue in your home when you have a police officer and children. That can be very interesting. So I'd love to be a fly on the wall some evenings. Now, let me go to Attorney Lanus. I think you have joined us, and you're kind of in the midst of these discussions, yes. I think, as we speak this evening in one of your official roles. Tell us who you are and some of the things that you would share with young men about what's happening today and how things are changing.
Yes, ma'am. Well, first, let me say thank you, ladies and gentlemen of Delta Sigma Theta, for allowing me to be on this call with you. This is a very important conversation. Tonight, the title that I'll be wearing is the East Baton Rouge Parish School Board Member for District 2, and as well as the immediate past president of our school system. When I think about these new laws, I think there's a lot that has to be discussed. And what I would also say is there was not enough discussion that happened with communities that are going to be the most affected by a lot of these laws, which are urban communities, low socioeconomic communities, as well as rural communities. The conversation that I would tell young people is understand the laws, read the laws, because in the state of Louisiana, ignorance of the law is no excuse. So you can't say, oh, I didn't know that. You need to understand the laws as they are so that we can continue to move forward and progress by creating systems that make sense for everyone, not just some people. And what I'll say is that my training comes from being a CBI specialist. I have attended meetings at the White House as well as the Department of Justice. So a lot of these conversations tonight and a lot of the advice that I give is going to be a reflection of that. But thank you again for having me on this call.
Thank you for being here.
Yes, ma'am.
So I think we're collecting, and I'm actually taking notes because I think we're collecting some things that probably need to be shared, maybe in writing once we finish this call, because some of the advice is very on point. Before we get into our questions, Representative Selders, last but not least, we'd like to have you introduce yourself.
Hey, good evening. I'm Larry Selders from Baton Rouge. I represent District 67. That's Old South Baton Rouge, downtown Baton Rouge, and I go all the way to Gardere. I have 2 little boys, and so this stuff is very, very important to me. My mom, she raised 4 boys to be men. I'm a social worker, and the best advice I have, I think folks kept saying it, is letting people know what's going on and how it's affecting us in the community. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. It's these fancy headphones. It's like the noise canceling, and sometimes I don't know if I'm talking to myself, but yeah, that's the biggest thing, and that's the thing. That's a lot of stuff that the caucus we've been trying to address. Just letting the folks know what we're facing. Because a lot of times you don't know, and just like I said, ignorance to the other law is not an excuse, but you do need to know that somebody's out to get you. You know, Louisiana is changing, and we're under attack. You know, these laws are just drastic. We're doing the best we can to fight it, but we are outnumbered. And so what we can do after these laws pass is to continue to try to empower the folks in our community to get out of the situation that we're in and to educate. But as of now, we can't change those laws. That's, you know, that they're just doing what they want, just honestly, and it's pretty sad. So Representative Selders, you are kind of giving us an inside look at the supermajority that I talked about. Oh yeah.
That's kind of how it works. So now that we know who we have with us tonight, I want to go back to Dr. Norris. And I want to go back to Dr. Norris because tonight I want to make sure that we touch on possible solutions in this complex environment. Depending on who you talk to, there is a relationship between healthy wages and crime rates. Depending on where you are in your beliefs, access to education becomes part of the solution. Dr. Norris, I've read about some of the work that you're doing and some of the programs that you have, specifically the program that you have around biotechnology careers. And it seems that you are doing a lot of work to try to prepare young men to compete in an environment where we now have diversity gaps in the workforce. And by doing that, I think the long-term goal is to put them in a position where they can earn healthy wages and be prepared to manage and sustain households. Can you tell us more about the work that you're doing?
Absolutely. You know, I appreciate this question because I really do see education as the great equalizer. I believe that education gets us at least on a playing field that's a little more equal. I'll read you some stats real quick, and I promise I won't bore you with it, but the people being sentenced in Louisiana are 3.8 times as likely to be Black as white, even though 31.2% of the population is Black and 57.9% is white. And as of 2022, 65% of Louisiana's prison population is Black. And so starting with the starting point for me that education is the great equalizer, you know, I'm constantly poring over data and looking at gaps and disparities. And I will tell you, while this data that I just shared with you is startling, when we look at our data as a higher ed enterprise in Louisiana and across the nation, Black males are also lagging behind in enrollment, retention, graduation rates, and those are just your traditional measures. We also know that they're lagging behind in non-traditional measures. They don't have access to mentors. They don't have access to research, study abroad. And so these non-traditional metrics are impacting those traditional metrics. And as I said in the beginning, I believe education is the great equalizer. So in 2021, we started this program. It's called the Reginald F. Lewis Scholars Program. And what we did is we got laser focused on those non-traditional measures or metrics, and we were intentional about making sure our Black males across our enterprise, across our system, would have access to research. They'd have access to study abroad. They'd have access to mentors, leaders. We make sure that they get to meet the Black Caucus. We make sure that they meet community leaders and that they have the network and social capital that their peers have. And what we're finding is that education and exposure are just the driving forces in making sure that our Black males get enrolled and they stay enrolled, they graduate and find good jobs. And so we started this program. We have now 54 scholars across our 9 institutions. And as we worked with folks across business and industry, we learned that the exposure piece to workforce is critical. And so we started exposing our scholars to a number of industries, from maritime to biotechnology. The National Science Foundation got wind of this, and they said to us, please apply for this grant. We worked with UL Lafayette. We were awarded $1 million to make sure that our scholars understood biotechnology. Now, you may say to me, Claire, are you only recruiting STEM majors? No, we're not. We are strategic about recruiting majors from diverse backgrounds because we understand that you can be an English major and do well in a biotechnology field. You can be a marketing major and do well in healthcare. And so what we're doing is we're exposing our Black males across our system to make sure that they see what they can be. And so we're really excited. We've taken, we'll take our second cohort to Paris this summer. We're going to take them and make sure they're able to present their research internationally. And I will tell you what's unique, and then I'll stop talking for a minute. But what's really unique about this program is folks say to me, why do you only take 2 from each institution every year, which maxes out at 54. What's happening is our young Black males are becoming ambassadors for this program across their campuses. And so they're spreading the word, and who better to hear this than, your peers are really the best influencers, at least at this point in your life. And so we're using that peer-on-peer mentoring. They're serving as ambassadors. They're going out and telling their folks to vote. They're actually making sure that they have created environments and safe spaces to have conversations around what it means to be a Black male. And so we're so excited about this program, but my hope is that we can get it to a place where it becomes a national framework, really across the United States.
Well, sounds like great work. And as you were talking, I was saying, wow, this sounds like a model that we may need to repeat in other places. So I think the fact that you're doing that work and exposing these young men, not just to those careers, but also to other parts of the world, I think will speak volumes. So we will definitely probably talk about that a little more. But thank you for sharing. Is Attorney Lanus, I saw him step away. I think he's in the midst of a East Baton Rouge Parish School Board meeting, so he may have stepped away.
I'm sorry, I'm here. I'm sorry. I had some connectivity problems. My apologies.
Oh, okay. You left my screen, so I was paying attention. But I want to stick with education because I agree with everyone that, you know, education is kind of a separator, and it is the great divide, and when we address that gap, we begin to produce skills and characteristics in our young people that will help them grow and sustain. So, Attorney Lanus, there's no doubt that you spend your days fighting for what's best for the students in the East Baton Rouge Parish School System. I've seen you on TV many times, and sometimes you are very passionate about the battle and the way you address the battle. So we appreciate that. Digging a little deeper, I really want to talk about the connection between education and crime rates and how we continue to invest in those school systems so that we are kind of not stuck in what we know in our community to be the school to prison pipeline. As we take resources out of the school systems are more challenged, the students are not getting everything that they need, and they end up graduating, and we have 18-year-olds who don't have a lot of direction. As we look at the lack of resources, and I'm gonna give you some leeway to kind of take this wherever you want to take it, but I really want to hear, or I want the people on this phone to hear how you see the relationship between community-based organizations and local schools playing a role in closing some of those gaps.
Yes, ma'am. Well, first, let me say this. I think you hit the hammer right on the head. For me, especially going to my second term, my major key that I wanted to focus on was going to be school safety inside of schools. Even though we went through some budget gaps and concerns last year and we were able to get out of that, one of the main things I wanted to shore up was that we had enough money to go towards school safety initiatives. And we put aside $1.5 million to see that we can see those things coming to fruition. Such things like making sure we have adequate cameras inside of blind spots around schools so that those access points are always being seen. Making sure that we have programs like Safe Passage that also get implemented inside of our schools to ensure that our community violence interventionists are inside of those schools and teachers are not the ones trying to break up fights, but not even an instance of having fights, making sure we can keep a lot of our truancy rates down, making sure kids are always inside of our classrooms. Another one was making sure that we work with our local law enforcement agencies to ensure that we put safe zones around every single high priority school. And a high priority school is one where you see a lot of fights happening or you see a lot of street activity happening around that school. And by doing so, we put a 1 mile radius safe zone around our schools. And it's something that we're continuously doing and trying to monitor. What I will say, though, is in terms of nonprofit organizations or outside organizations that want to come inside of our school system is desperately needed. This is one of the things we talk about and we talk about and we talk about, but it's not coming to fruition. But now it is time to really put boots on the ground and ensure that we have outside entities who have the training, who have the certifications, and who have the dedication to get those things done for us. We have a community with so many resources that we just have not simply tapped into. And it's because school systems, not just East Baton Rouge Parish, but school systems themselves feel as though they can do everything themselves. And that is where the ball has been dropped. You cannot expect a teacher to continuously be a therapist, to be a parent, to be a teacher, and to help that child when they have their own issues and problems they have to deal with, right? And it only puts more of a bog down. And that's why you see so many teacher shortages happening around our country, for other reasons, obviously, too, but with the increase in crime happening around our country, because it's not just happening here in Baton Rouge. You see this happening in every major city. It's because of
Looks like we lost him. Okay, I think he must have run into some communication challenge.
There you
go. Back. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes, we have you now. We had you.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm back. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, and I'm sorry, I just wrap up here and saying that now you see a lot of those community violence interventions dollars come down, not just from the DOJ or the Department of Justice, but you also see the White House being actively involved inside of cities that have high crime rates.
Okay. Thank you. And one of the things you mentioned the White House, you learned in my introduction that I have a lot of background, a lot of experience with the federal government. It's been very interesting to watch the funding come out of Washington and how it's been targeted in this generation. Very few people have been paying attention to it, but it's very specific in terms of funding community-based programs, community capability building type programs to really target some of the gaps. And I think if we can continue to get that kind of support out of Washington, all of our organizations can grow and kind of do their part in addressing what we're talking about. So thank you for mentioning that. Representative Selders, first, let me say congratulations. I think you're a fairly new legislature. Serving in that capacity is a labor of love. To many citizens, it is a mystery what happens in the halls of the Capitol. What have you learned in your time as a representative about how the average citizen can participate in the political process? We know we have to go out and vote. That's a given. But in addition to that, what role can citizens and community-based organizations play to shape the discussions that lead to legislation?
And the number one thing is organize. Organize, showing up. You want your elected officials to know that you care. Sometimes when folks don't show up, the people may assume it's not a big deal because the other side, they're showing up. And they're actually passing legislation. So showing up, NAACP does a great job, Vote does a great job by showing up, letting folks know what the needs are in your community. And just, continue to have workshops, continue to tell people, the legislators, how they feel. Because if you don't know, you don't know. There's all kind of lobbyists here, all kind of groups here, and they're expressing their concerns. But if you don't go back to your community or folks not coming to this house to let you know their opinions, and all you can do is assume. I'm just gonna say that. But the NRA, I'm saying that because they lobbied so hard and they came up here so much. They allowed legislation to pass where anybody from 18 and up can have a gun, concealed gun, without a permit. And I'm saying that because the opposite side of the spectrum, we should have thousands and hundreds of people here saying that they didn't like this legislation, but it wasn't. It was more people. We had more people supporting it than we did that was against it, and it's gonna affect us the most. So organization, and that's what people don't know, and that's how you participate in the political process. Calling your representative's office. You get emails all the time, but when somebody shows up and they're compassionate about it, it just takes it to a whole nother level. Because sometimes we have like a lot of automated emails. You just sign your name up, but we do go through these emails. We know which ones are personal, and those are the folks that get those phone calls back. Those are the folks that say, look, this is the kind of legislation I want to see my representative pass. And so, that's our job, is to bring the legislation here. And so that's what something that the folks can do. But showing up, that's it. Because after this, after you vote, you gotta hold your legislators accountable, and that's the biggest thing: holding folks accountable, talking to them, letting them know when you have issues. And it's okay to agree to disagree, but just talking to your legislators is just the number one place to start. And I feel like I'm an accessible person. I feel like most legislators should be accessible.
Thank you for that insight. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit because I think we want everybody to better understand the new law around guns. We've all heard that, to be open carry, people will have better access to guns. Can you help us understand what actually changed when this last law was passed?
Okay, well, Louisiana, we were already
camera off so they can see.
We were already an open carry state. So we already, you're already able, you was already legally, you could carry a gun in the open. With the law that changed, now you can have a concealed weapon. And so concealed handgun. So anybody, what they talk about is they talk about the 47 other states that have this law. What they don't talk about is the only 4 states allow 18-year-olds to have guns concealed. So we're talking about 18-year-olds with guns, but you can't even purchase a handgun in Louisiana at 18. So who's going to give you these guns? Where are you going to get these guns from? So that's a whole nother problem within itself. So not only did they do that, they also brought back qualified immunity for police officers. So if a police officer shoots you wrongfully, you can't go do it. You can't have a silver suit. So this is a protection act because the police was against it. They didn't want everybody having a gun. They don't know who has a gun. It's very dangerous for everybody. So it affects, the folks that's going to restaurants eating. It affects the folks that's at parades, affects students. Now that somebody's bringing legislation where teachers could have guns in the classroom. So it's a lot going on out here. I'm just gonna tell you that. And all we can do is, continue to fight and continue to, just be advocates and let folks know what's actually happening and what you should be looking for.
Well, thank you for helping us kind of understand the details. I think everybody agreed that we have a series of unknowns in front of us that we just don't know how to prepare for. Some think we already have too many guns, and increasing the number and the access to guns, will continue to put people in our community at risk. So I think this dialogue we're having tonight is the beginning of a discussion that we'll probably have to continue for a very long time. So thank you for helping us better understand that. I want to go ahead.
I'm sorry, and I didn't say because, what they did do in addition, if you do have a concealed weapons permit, you get immunity too. If you was to shoot somebody, that was another law that passed and was signed. So if I have a concealed weapons permit, meaning that I've been trained to shoot and protect myself, I have immunity for those silver suits as well. So that's a law that people don't even talk about.
Okay.
So anybody can get immunity.
Interesting. All right, I'm going to shift branches of government now and go to our Chief Judge Johnson. The debate that we have, I think, is huge. But I do think that as we continue this discussion, we will continue to get back to education. Judge Johnson, when I was preparing, I read your brief bio because there's no way we could put everything that you've accomplished on the internet. And in there was a very simple statement, and it states, Judge Johnson holds a firm conviction that education is the key to his success. While it is a simple statement, it delivers a huge message. It actually tells me that you see the judicial system to be the latter step in the cycle, and that there are many systems, be it the family system, the educational system, our community networks, etc., that have a responsibility to developing our youth long before they're introduced to the judicial system. What advice do you now have for community leaders and leaders in those various systems about the characteristics we need to instill in our youth to better prepare them to avoid the justice system?
I want to thank you for your statement about education and my perspective on education. In a sense, we've never had adequate resources. So let's start with the premise that we've never have had adequate resources. But the resources we did have, the very basic resources we did have, kept everybody who's attending this forum basically operating their lives on a certain street. And when I say that, I mean on a certain pathway. And there were shoulders that we got off on the shoulder from time to time, but we always got back on this main road of how to behave and how to act and how to do things. Very rarely did we get off in the ditch because we knew that it's very hard to pull someone out of the ditch. So we created this lane of how to do things. And one of the tools that I thought that was so important for me was the stressing of the impact of what education could do for our children. That if we were able to educate ourselves, that asset could help us overcome almost anything that structurally was putting our way, that we didn't cause. We could just tear down mountains with our elevation of basic knowledge of comprehensive skills and learning reading and writing. So with that foundation, look what happens. The system is at a disadvantage. You are not at a disadvantage anymore. See, the assumption is that we're disadvantaged, so these laws are going to disproportionately adversely affect us because we've assumed that we're disadvantaged. By what? What made us disadvantaged? Was it the lack of education? For the most part, that was the major thing. We were not prepared. We were not prepared to compete. First grade of school, I arrived at Park Elementary's teacher said, "Class, you're behind. Class, I'm going to tell you again, you're behind." I went home and asked my mom, "This is the first day of school. How am I behind? We've never had a test." And she looked at me in her wise way and said, "Yes, Don, you are behind, but you didn't put yourself behind. So you run real fast and catch up." So that is what I did. I ignored what was in the neighborhood. I ignored the environment. I said yes instead of saying no, that we couldn't, and pressed on and continued with the idea that one day I would be able to write, and I did write in the last PhD I got, that somehow I had overcome. I had overcome my own belief that somehow I was inadequate, because that was the basic premise, that if I accepted that I was unequal, then I was already at a disadvantage if I accepted it. So we cannot accept that we're disadvantaged. We cannot accept that. We must take the tools that we have and use those tools. So here's my lesson plan. We have failed to parent our own children. We have failed to educate our own children. Whose responsibility that is? It's certainly not my teacher. I'm the teacher. And I have not taught my generation how to teach, how to school, how to parent. So basically it goes back to this concept that I call, I am the teacher. The teacher at the school is a sub-teacher or extra teacher or co-teacher. I'm the primary teacher. And we have got to envision a way that we're going to co-teach and co-parent our children with the school system. So my idea is, let's invent this idea of reschooling. The fact that the parents are either struggling with issues or they're separated, or they're one family homes and are not able to provide basic educational values. We need to teach the parents how to parent. We need to teach the parents the subject matters that the school children are learning. I don't even see reinforcement going on at home from the lesson that's taught during the day. The children come home and there's no reinforcement. Everything is not reinforced, the lessons that are done that day. So let's teach our parents, our young parents particularly, how to become parent educators. I think if we focus our directive in that area, right now we can start the catalyst to let our parents know the importance of how they must educate their own children. And that's what's lacking. We're solely dependent on public education to educate, and we're running now away from that to chartered education. And on top of that, we're afraid of our own self. Who, I'll ask you, do you run from now? Who are you afraid of? Our boys. That's who you're afraid of. Who you're running from. Who you're locking yourself away from. From me. Now that's what we're faced with. That's why I say let's rethink what we're doing. All right, that's enough.
It's not enough. Thank you, Judge Johnson. So I'm hearing a theme, and this may be a little kind of shift from the laws, but I'm hearing we need to start at home. Whether it's the family unit, whether it's education, whether it's speaking up about what we need in our community. So some of our investment starts with investing in ourselves and our own homes, so we're better prepared to deal with life and hopefully avoid the judicial system.
Most definitely.
So just kind of giving you some of my thoughts. Michelle, I think you are monitoring the chat, and I hear there's some questions out there. I'll take a question from the chat now.
All right, and good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for your comments and engaging with us in this very important discussion this evening. First question, and any of you can answer, how would you propose that we get the youth engaged? And this, Judge Johnson backs up to your last comment. How would you get the youth engaged in proactively learning the laws that will directly affect them?
Our children are very interested in, if I commit an act, what the punishment is going to be. I go to schools all the time. Judge Johnson, what do you get for this crime? What do you get for that? So I'm taking the law into the classroom to educate our children, but that's not a systematic approach. So we don't know if we violate the law, what the punishment could be. But here's something more basic. Knowing what the punishment could be, would that be a deterrent? Would that in and of itself deter me from committing that crime, knowing what the punishment that I could get? And I'm saying to you that I don't think so, because the connectivity between the time I commit a crime and the time if I'm held accountable is slow in becoming. So basically, we don't have swift and certain punishment within our system right now. We don't have that. And that's lacking. So I think we need to establish a way of letting the public know, letting our families know that if you commit a crime, you're going to be held accountable. None of us want you to commit a crime and get away with it. We don't accept that. And we don't want people to think that somehow we're soft on crime. Who told us that we're soft on crime? We're tough on crime. That's my perspective. That's what I've seen. You family members have come to me and say, Judge, I want you to be tough on crime. I want this mess to stop. That's what you told me. So how do you want me to stop it? Well, when it concerns your child, you want me to be soft. When it concerns somebody else's child, you're telling me to be the hardest judge in town. So what I'm saying is we have to balance our approaches, what we're doing here, but I'm getting a little bit off track because I know this is a frustrating situation we're in. And it looks like the hammer of the government has come on us and said we're going to be hard on African Americans because you're out here doing all this criminal conduct and we're sick and tired of it. And we want you judges to do something about it. If you won't do anything about it, we're going to tell you what to do, and you're going to lose your discretion over this type of conduct. We want it to stop too. And that's the message that we're not delivering to our counterparts. We are tough as nails on criminality, on criminal conduct. We want everybody who engaged in criminal conduct held accountable. The issue becomes, what is an acceptable response to the criminogenic conditions that we're facing? Domestic violence, gun violence, out of control. So what do? Sit back and allow our government to tell us we're going to write some laws for you characters that don't know how to behave, when we could self-police ourselves and won't have to deal with any regulation of state.
Attorney Lanus, I don't see your image. I hope you're still with us. I want to toss a question to you because there's one word that I haven't heard tonight, and that is accountability. At what point do we start talking to our young men about accountability, not just educating themselves, but also being accountable for their actions? And I like to say when people are watching and when people are not watching.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me first say, Judge Johnson just hit the hammer on the head. A lot of what you see happening in terms of our kids and the violence you see that is turned over in schools, a lot of it happens inside of the community. When you see some of the parents that come to school, a lot of that violence also happens there. There has been an increase in parents having fights at school, on school campuses. So you think about how it reflects when a child goes home, when they're inside of that environment. It's a direct reflection of what we see happening inside of our schools. One of which has been a serious turnover in a lot of our school-based policies. One of which, as I said before, if you are a parent and you step on a school's campus and you attempt to try to fight, you can go to jail now. Because we have no choice but to make these types of changes, just like Judge Johnson just said, because it's not just a judicial system that is having these policy conversations about if the schools are not going to do it, we're going to force them to do it. And we don't want to be placed in a situation where we lose all authority and the state tells us exactly how we should be running our schools. So our approach is, one, parents have to be more involved in what's happening with their child. Two, if they are not involved, how do you hold parents accountable? I think that is a conversation that has to happen, not just in the legislature, but also all around our community. The school can only do so much. They can only do so much for a child. The child is inside of a school for 8 hours. When they go back home, there's nothing the school can do. If a parent is out there and they need help, they have to be willing and ready to ask. A lot of parents don't want to ask for help. When you look at a lot of the parents who cause a lot of the mischief that's happening inside of schools, are the ones that are having the biggest problems with kids when they leave the four walls of our schools. Those are the ones who also had problems when they were in school. You know, if you look at a lot of these studies, they show you more than you need to know. If you ask me right now, Mr. Landis, how many fights has occurred inside of East Baton Rouge Parish schools over the course of the last 2 years? That answer is 6,573 fights. I'll say that again, 6,573 fights. When a child fights inside of our schools, there's going to be an alternative matter that's going to take place. That means now they're not learning. Now they're inside of an alternative school where they really don't care to be there. And, you know, there's a defined difference when you talk about kids. You have at-risk students and you have high-risk students, and you have to be able to understand what's the difference, because you have to know how you approach those types of kids. You cannot approach them the same way. And that risk student is one who goes to school, does work, but they're literally right on the cusp, on the line of attempting to not want to do work or being involved in something they shouldn't be involved in, or even falling or dropping out of school. A high-risk student is one who has high truancy, who is already involved in street level violence, and they need not intervention, they need prevention. And that's another thing. There's two different ways that you approach this work in terms of community violence intervention. You have intervention and you have prevention work. Prevention-based work happens on the tail end. Those are the ones who really, really are already over that line, and you're really trying to draw them back. Those are the ones who people lose a lot of hope for. But those are also the ones who are more actively involved in a lot of the criminal activities that we're talking about tonight. So, you know, the end all be all also goes back to what Representative Selder said. We have to have conversations, and it's going to be some uncomfortable conversations, because a lot of parents think that, oh, their child is just so precious and no, my child cannot do this. You need to know what is happening with your child. What is it that they're involved in? Who are their friends? What communities are they going into? Because a lot of these things are driving forces in terms of crime happening around our community. When you see drops in crime, you know, you have to look at the totality of what that drop means or when it goes up. What I can tell you is burglaries are going up. Armed robberies are going up. So when you talk about 18-year-olds being able to get guns or purchase guns, handguns at that, that's going to just exacerbate a lot of those issues, which is why a lot of conversations have to take place now. I saw somebody put a question, how can the church get involved? The church has to also institute these conversations. And you know, what I'll also say is you have to know who's having the conversation. Our kids are not crazy. They're not stupid. And there's this such thing as a snitch. You know, there are a lot of these conversations about who they can trust. You have to be able to have conversations with people who they can trust, who they feel comfortable with. You have to be able to create safe spaces so they can let you know what's exactly going on. I mean, you know, and I'll wrap up here. There was one case with this child, and they caught it so late that it was, you know, he ended up falling into the mix. He was a new student coming from a different school, and the first day, I'll call them bullies. They took him to the bathroom. They beat the child up. They put him upside down, and they took his wallet and they told him, if you tell anybody about this, we know where you live. Well, this child, the very next day, brings a gun to school, and they say, just so happened they found it on the school bus. And when you have the conversation with him, what he said was, I was not intending to hurt anybody, but these guys beat me up in the bathroom. They had my wallet. They had my driver's license. And they knew where I lived. And they told me that if I told anybody, they were going to hurt me. So I brought this gun to school so I could protect myself. And what I'll tell you is, while you may not hear a lot of these cases, these happen more than you think, which is why we have to be more actively involved in having uncomfortable conversations with our kids. Do not be afraid to search their rooms. No child should have a gun inside of their room, inside of your house. You have to know these prevention-based programs so that they can help you figure out how do you institute these things inside of your home. There are a lot of programs, and I love to talk about it. And before I get off this chat, I'll be sure to drop some of those programs down inside of the chat box so these conversations can happen. But thank you for that question.
Ms. Whitney, let me just say one thing and add in. You asked me about the value of education and how that would, with my focus on education, how I could get out of poverty, no shoes and 2 pair of pants to wear the whole school year. What was there was the teacher was teaching me math, English, science, language, writing, and that kind of thing. That teacher had assumed that I had already been taught a certain amount of values, that I had already been taught a certain amount of understanding of respect, honesty, truth, integrity. So if we don't have those taught to us, the math, the science, the language, it's not really going to matter because we don't have the foundational infrastructure to receive that kind of education. What was traditional for us in education is not sufficient for the children we have now because the core values, and one of the webinar chat talked about integrity. That is what's lacking. That is what our parents are not teaching and instilling in the children. Respect, decency, values, treat people as yourself. Unless you have that basic foundation to build the educational system we have on top of, we're not going anywhere with a successful change until that happens. That's my theory of how to get out of this hole. We need to go back to some basics in terms of what we want our children to value. And we're so out here on money as our value. We're so out here on looks as our value. We're so out here trying to convince people we look the best. We have all of these exterior features. We're not focused on the internal values. We've got to re-educate on what those are and how they are so powerful. My mom told me this, Don, you can be the smartest boy, but I want a good son. You can be as smart as you want, but at the end of the day, I better have a good boy. I didn't understand what she was getting at. I do now. I certainly do. It's the goodness that succeeds, not the smartness. I'll stop there.
So Representative Sell.
I'm sorry, if I could just add to that, I saw in the chat, Ms. Frances Smith wrote community and how every other parent in her neighborhood was allowed to discipline. One thing that we're also missing, it certainly starts in the family, But then we add the neighborhood, a layer of community support. We add the church, another layer of community support. Education system, that should be another layer of support. It's almost as if lately we've been working in these fragmented systems where we're not communicating and supporting one another. It truly takes a village. I can think of times, when my parents had to work late, they could count on my neighborhood to feed us, to take care of us, to make sure we were okay. And you're just not seeing those layers of support anymore. And one of the things we did, I'll tell you this real quickly, but the Scholars Program is we're lucky because they have the layer of support at their institutions. On top of that, they get the support of the system. On top of that, they have the support of the community. And so I agree, family matters, parents matter, but we also know it takes a village. And I think that if I was called to some action, I recognize the importance of me serving as a mentor, going out into the community, helping my neighbors, and working with these folks. And so I just wanted to add that to the layer of parenting.
Thank you for that, Dr. Norris. Representative Selders, as I listened to the dialogue tonight, I would just like to hear from you your opinion on Louisiana's budget and how well we are investing in the educational solutions. So, we're quick to take, during the times of budget cuts, cut education. How are we doing? And then the second part of that question is, how do we add a voice to that discussion? So you have multiple organizations represented here. In the next budget cycle, is there a message that we need to bring to the state legislators as they're preparing budgets?
Well, that's definitely a great question. And with this, like I said, this is definitely a totally different administration. Their values are different from the ones in the governor in the past. But constitutionally, you only can cut two things, and that's education and that's healthcare. Everything else is protected under the Constitution, where you can't cut their budgets. So when you start, pulling back the fat, start cutting budgets, they're always going to be what's getting cut, and that's the law. And I think after this session, we're looking to have a constitutional convention in which redraws that maybe the Constitution of Louisiana and maybe be able to help or not, depending on which way they want to go, the education and healthcare system we have here. But the biggest thing we could do is, like I said, continue to advocate, and and request that we fund education and just continue to fight for it, finding ways to cut other resources to fill it. But the way things are going now, honestly, there a lot of cuts are happening, and that's happening up front. A lot of tort reform, a lot of reforms coming when they with taxes, and we're not going to be getting as much. They're not accepting money from the federal government that can really help us. And it's obvious, I think it's $71 million to feed kids, and we rejected it from the federal government. So things like that is a reoccurring issue that we're having now with this administration, and we can have to wait and see what's going to happen in the future. And that's my honest opinion, and what I've been seeing, and what y'all probably been seeing as well, and reading in the paper. And that's really what's going on.
Well, thank you for that. Michelle, I'm going to come to you again. Are there any other kind of burning questions in the chat?
Yes, we have several. And one of the biggest ones that I see a recurring theme here is related to truancy. And so I can, Dr. Norris, you can comment, Mr. Lannis, if you like, but how do you propose exactly, what do you propose by rigorously enforcing truancy?
I don't have a problem taking this question first. One of the main problems we have with truancy is when is it documented? The past, or the way that it's currently been done, is if the 5 days you document whether or not a child's been in school, that's entirely too long. Because once a child hits 10 days, they have technically failed the entire semester. When I see a child that has 5 days and you're in the middle of the semester, that tells me that that child is not going to be able to pass. And what history has shown us and what statistics have shown us is that if a child falls behind, especially while they're in high school between the grades 9 and 12, they're more than likely not going to be able to catch up and they're not going to be able to graduate. One of the new laws that also came from BESE, which is the Board of Secondary and Board of Elementary and Secondary Education, as well as the state government, is there is no longer a graduation appeal process. What does this mean? If a child does not get caught up the way that they should before they are of graduation age or before they make it to the end of the year, their 12th grade year, they cannot appeal that process if they do not have enough credits. That means you're going to have an abundance of kids that are in rural and urban areas, much like Baton Rouge, Shreveport, New Orleans, Jefferson Parish. These students are not going to be able to graduate. And because the school age cuts off at a certain age, it's just going to build up an even bigger issue that we're dealing with. When you talk about, gun laws, you have to also look at how it's going to negatively affect education. But in terms of truancy, we have to document after 2 days. It doesn't matter if it's a doctor excuse. It doesn't matter if the parent says, my child was with me. No, we have to document after 2 days, and not just document, we have to track these students. There's not a true tracking process that we have used. And I'm only using our district. There hasn't been a true tracking process. What we use is the sheriff's department. Whereas you talk to a lot of our deputies, they'll tell you, we chase behind kids and those kids just don't want to come to school. So why are we chasing behind them every day? This is not to knock our sheriff's department because they do as much as they can. But it's the same thing I said about the home environment. We cannot place more on these agencies than they are available and able to do. I think that we have to use, again, these nonprofit organizations who have the wherewithal, who have the training and the certification to help us in a lot of these areas. Because one, they are also receiving CBI dollars, but two, they understand these complex issues inside of it from a community standpoint, which, as I said before, a lot of these things are rolling over from the community inside of our schools, and it shows every single day.
Ms. Whitley, can I comment on that also, please? This is Ernie Singleton.
Sure.
I just want to comment on the truancy conversation. I deal with this as well. And what Mr. Landon stated was true. Truancy is defined as 5 unexcused absences or 5 tardies within a semester, not in the school year, in a semester. So a student who has missed 2 days and 2 days tardy is almost considered truant. So it's important that in our school systems, as well as our community, we are focused on what is occurring with that student on day 2, not on day 4 of when this occurs. So having that family engagement is really important, and making sure that we have systems in place in all of our school systems to where they are able to track where a student is on a daily basis is very important. One of the things that BESE did last month was to require that all school systems to report daily attendance up to the Louisiana Department of Education every day starting in 24-25. In the past, that information was not provided to LDOE, maybe on a quarterly basis, and really and truly school systems did not have to provide that information until the end of school year data collection in July. But now that information will be provided to the LDOE on a daily basis, and we'll be better able to see where truancy issues are occurring more frequently, which hopefully will be able to have people go out to provide assistance. There is an assistance right now there is a pilot going around with several school systems where they are looking at various technologies to better address attendance and truancy issues. And if we address the attendance issue overall, truancy will go down. Right now, the truancy rate in the state of Louisiana is at 42%. That is very high.
Yes.
And we say, it's high school. It's not just high school. Surprisingly, one of the grade levels that are really high truancy is K, 3, and 9. You say, well, why is kindergarten truant? Because the parents can't get them to school. Or maybe it's just that it's a 10th grader that having to get up in the morning because the mama got to work overnight or daddy got to work overnight, and nobody's getting that kindergartner up to go to school. So truancy is really high in grades K, 3, and 9. And when you have a truant person in K or 3, that's going to negatively affect them later on in life. So that is where it has to start at an elementary level. People say, oh, we shouldn't be worried about them at elementary level. Yes, we should.
Yes.
And that is where it starts, at that level. And so in order to really get those truancy numbers down, it's going to take a variety of people to get those numbers down and make sure those students are in school. Sorry, that's just a passionate area of mine. I had to speak up. I'm going to go back off.
That's
Happy,
okay.
happy that you spoke up.
If you don't mind, I would love to just piggyback on that real quick. And that was all excellent points. I mean, eloquently put together and said, because I couldn't say it any better myself. The only thing I would add to that is we need early detection systems that let us know which kids are going to be most likely to be truant. So what do I mean by that? I think trying to collect truancy data in real time, I think that it puts us behind on the 8 ball, because it's, is it Dr. Singleton?
Yes.
As Dr. Singleton just said, the truancy rate is already high. The indicators that we need to be looking at is what happened with that child last year. We can look at that attendance rate from last year and say, okay, this child needs to be placed on a monitoring system to ensure that they are coming to school, and we are always following up with that parent to ensure that they're here. Experts have now said that if a child is by grade 3, if they are behind on grade level, they are not going to be on track to graduate by 12th grade. How has this been collected? Because they did an early detection system that showed the students who were severely behind on grade level by grade 3, they were more than likely not going to graduate from high school, and those graduation rates have been abysmal. But for those who just need to have, a picture of how bad this problem is, inside of East Baton Rouge Parish right now, 52% of our students are not reading on grade level. When you correlate that to how many students are not graduating, I'm talking about Black students, being that we are a 76% Black district. We have 56% of our Black boys who are not graduating from our school system. And if that is not troubling, and if that does not worry you, that is a problem, because that directly correlates to what you see in terms of crime and the way it's heightening, and the way these students, I won't call them students, in the way that these young people are being inserted and going to parish prison inside of our city.
Wow. Michelle, is there one last question before we wrap up? I think we could probably continue this discussion for hours and break it into parts, because we've kind of hit a lot of areas, but I'll take one last question as we begin to wrap up.
Okay, and this one will be a two-parter. Dr. Norris, the first part will be for you, and Representative Selders, the last part will be for you. The first part is directly related to conflict resolution. Dr. Norris, there are several comments in the chat related to the number of fights when Attorney Landis mentioned that. So this was directly related to conflict resolution. Is there a course curriculum? And if so, when can they be initiated? And for Representative Selders, the question to you, once Dr. Norris is finished, is how can the laws that we've discussed this evening, where can people go to interpret them in layman's terms? That's been the resounding question throughout the chat. So I'll let you ponder on that while we go to Dr. Norris. Thank you.
So as it relates to conflict resolution, it's funny you ask that, because when do you start? You start immediately. Conflict is something that you will have from starting at birth until. And so I think that Judge Johnson hit on it. You start in the home. You learn how to have conflict resolution, and it doesn't mean that you're going to end up feeling like, everyone you're going to get what you want. That's not conflict resolution. And I will tell you guys that what we're noticing even on college campuses, because it hasn't been dealt with either in the home or K through 12, our college students even struggle with conflict resolution. So we're having to have conversations, and what's happening is that's impacting our retention, and it's impacting our graduation rate. Our college students don't know how to have conflict with their roommates. And it's inevitable. You live with someone for a long time in a tight space, you will have conflict. And so, if it's something we could start talking about in the homes, in the communities, in the churches, it's healthy to have conflict resolution. Conflict is a natural part of life. And so, as we think about as it relates to Black males and we see the violence, if we don't start having these conversations in the home, if we don't start having these conversations in schools, the churches, we're in trouble. We're seeing, I will tell you another thing that's very much tied to violence, crime, conflict resolution. We're seeing higher rates of mental health issues than we have ever seen before on our college campuses. Our young adults have no idea how to deal with this conflict. And so, in conflict between their advisors, conflict with faculty, conflict with peers. And so, I think back to even the truancy issues, and it really all is so intertwined. It's a Gordian knot that's difficult to disentangle. I think about the things I learned at school beyond reading and writing and math. You learn how to problem solve. You learn how to have conflict with your peers. You learn social support. You learn how to reciprocity and give and take. And so, these are the things you do that's not necessarily in the curriculum. I don't know that we need a conflict resolution class. I think we need folks who are talking about it in the schools, kids who are attending those schools, and really working through those practices. I think sometimes we try to force everything into a curriculum, and sometimes that's just not necessary. I think that, teaching young folks to have conversations, to learn those skills of communication, adaptability, resiliency, all work together with conflict resolution. So I hope that helps.
Well, thank you.
And I'll piggyback off that and answer that second part of the question. And what we didn't talk about was that now with the new legislation, 17-year-olds are considered adults. So we're talking about 11th graders with conflict, with normal problems, now have to go to parish prison. So those are the kind of things that, we really have to get in front of, because it could be a simple fight at school. Now you're going to the parish prison. If you break somebody's cell phone, that's a felony charge. You're an adult now at 17. You're going to parish prison. So these are the kind of things that we're going to have to just kind of stay in front of because of the new laws, and that normal things that normal kids do. Like I said, I grew up in a house full of boys. We fought, with conflict resolution, but we had to because my mama made us, and that's what the judge says, that everything starts at home. But, everybody don't always have that home structure. And so that's why it's important to have good teachers and good social workers. I'm a social worker, so mental health, and she hit it on the head. Nobody talks about mental health. This is foreign to us. We sometimes growing up, we always thought kids were bad, but these kids have underlying issues that now I'm just happy that we're getting at a place where mental health is not a bad word. It's normal, and so those are the kind of things we just have to continue to address. And someone asked about the legislation in layman's terms. The only thing I can really suggest is, going to the website, legis.la.gov. You can actually find the legislation. You could go to looking at the bills. You can track the bills and bills that have been passed. And there's something on there that has like a digest. And that's as simple as it gets. It tells you exactly what the bill does. And sometimes, just be honest, I have to ask the staff. I have to ask them, hey man, what does this bill do? Because sometimes, folks will put things in bills, with underlying issues. It's just stuff that you really have to follow. And because you don't want to learn about a bill too late. But yep, you can go to legislative.gov and you can track these bills. You can read the digest, and they'll tell you exactly what the bill does. I think that was a question someone had. What about finding it in layman's terms?
Well,
We had over 1,000 bills filed this year. This session, this is our third session since January.
I want to thank all of the panelists and all of our virtual guests for being with us this evening. It has truly been a much needed dialogue. And I have a few notes, but I think the summary I would give us to just take away and think about, I can tell by listening to the voices that I've heard this evening that we all are familiar with a community where there were no hard lines between family, church, school, and those activities that our parents put us in. We've now drawn some hard lines, and those systems, in Dr. Norris's words, are fragmented. They're not totally functioning, doing everything that they need to do, and our community is suffering. I'll go back to something Chief Judge Johnson said as we started. It starts with self. And the laws on the books are basically irrelative if you're not out breaking the laws. So we have to get our young people back to a place where they are hungry to do the work that they need to do to be great citizens in this country. And I think some of the statistics we've heard, I've written them down, but I won't repeat them, but around the graduation rate, around the reading levels are very startling. And it tells me that if we don't do something pretty quickly as a community, what we see in our community is going to go down before it goes up. So I think this discussion should continue. Not tonight, but it should continue, because I think, we all have work to do in the various organizations that we represent. But I agree, somebody said tonight that churches should start having these communities. We are now talking about how organizations partner with school systems. We're going to have to get back to being one big community to really figure out how we touch the kids and fill the gaps. The family is not what it used to be, and the kids are suffering. So how do we as a community begin to fill those gaps and make sure that we are addressing the needs that we can and bring in the skills and our expertise to the table to really reinvest? This debate about being tough on crime will continue. We are living in a state with new leadership and new laws that will change the length of sentences, the number of guns in our community, and how convictions are handled. When we get into the details, there could very well be blurred lines between the problem and the solution. If we stick to the common ground, which is we all want to keep our families and neighbors safe, we will have to continue to grow our community-based solutions. In our community, we must be very purposeful about the solutions and how we invest in both our families and our youth. So I'll wrap up by saying tonight we talked a lot about the relationship between access to education and crime rates. We've talked about citizens participating in the legislative process. We've talked about how leaders can continue to build the character in our youth that they need to sustain themselves. And we've also talked about the critical role that community-based organizations can play in the solution. I hope our panelists have given you much to think about and possibly ignited a spark to help you see how you can be a part of the solution. Thank you all for being with us tonight, and thank you for taking time to become more informed citizens. My last task is to introduce Dr. Michael McCallahan, who serves as the NAACP Louisiana State Conference President. He oversees the coordination of 30 adult branches and youth and college chapters across the state. He was recently elected to serve on the NAACP National Board of Directors, and we are happy to have him and his organization to be our partners for tonight's forum. Dr. Callahan, over to you. And after that, we'll have closing remarks from Michelle Dennis.
I want to say thanks to Baton Rouge Sigma Alumni Chapter, President Singleton, Chair Lewis, and this group of esteemed panelists, Dr. Johnson, my friend Larry Selders, my friend Dr. Norris, and my good friend Davis Landis. Truly, this is a well-needed conversation, but we can't talk about solutions without having the young people come to the table. At some point in time, we're going to have to bring these young people, no matter what ages they are, to the table to hear from them. As an older person, I can talk and tell you what I think should happen. But we need to bring them. They need to be part of the solution. But also, we need to start, as you alluded to, education. Education is watered down. An older gentleman told me years ago, you can't pass on something that you do not have. If these young mothers and young fathers never experience morality, integrity, they can't pass it on to their children. And so we have responsibilities, not only at our churches, not only fraternities, sororities, but there are a whole lot of organizations, for-profit, non-profit, that's doing a lot of work that needs a little help. They can bring in more youth, more children to help bring about change, because truly the change starts in the mindset of anyone. We have to change the mindsets of these children that are being traumatized in these various environments before we can get them to start acting differently. They're traumatized at home. They're traumatized in the buses. They're traumatized when they get to school. They're traumatized when they go to football games. They're traumatized when they go to basketball games. They're trauma everywhere. We must break that traumatic cycle in order to get our kids and our youngsters to start acting differently. And also, we must change about the way we think about education. Everyone isn't educated the same. Everybody doesn't learn the same. And kids that are part of this truancy system, they don't want to be educated in a traditional classroom setting anyway. We must meet them where they're at. Because if we don't, the system will meet them, either in the graveyard or in the penal institution system. So we must change our thinking about how we reach these kids, because they can't be reached. A lot of times, all they want to do is what? Feel love. And I can tell you, based upon all these 100 or so persons on this call, there's a lot of love to go around. How do we channel that love? One thing that I heard talked about is that we have some agendas going around. Claire talked about it being fragmented. We as Black people need to sit down collectively and come up with the Black agenda. Because clearly we don't have anything that we can clearly hold our hats onto other than a little bit of this and a little bit of that. But clearly we need to sit down and think about what we need to do for our generations to come. Once we do that, and then those of us like me, I can kind of fade away because there is something written down that we could follow, that we could use for generations to come. Lastly, but also, we must hold everyone, somebody say this word, accountable. If you're an elected official, if you're an appointed official, if you're in a position of authority that can make change, we need to hold you accountable. Black, white, green, rich, poor, they need to be held accountable. And we need to do it openly, because if I correct you, behind closed doors, they might get it. But if we have to hold these people where we send to young people and old people, everybody's in this. We're all in this together. We're going to rise together or we're going to fall together. And right now, we're already down. We got nowhere else to go but up. But it's going to take the Deltas, the Alphas, the AKA, the Sigmas, the Masons, the Eastern Stars, the basketball team, the football team, the cheerleading squad. It's going to take those of us that have car washing job, those of us that have these Fortune 500 jobs. It's going to take all of us working together to make it happen. And we can. The NAACP, to help with the supermajority, filed a lawsuit because we knew that the numbers were not in our favor. And we happily filed a lawsuit and we're winning. Tell Governor Jeff Landry, I said, tell the governor, tell the supermajority state senators and the state legislators that we're on our way. We've got to break that up because we need people in the legislative house that understand our plight. Right now, they don't because they have a supermajority. And we can go down and advocate. I think Representative Sessions was right. Those of us need to go down there because the man gonna keep his knee on our neck. If he don't think that we don't like it on our neck, he gonna keep it on our neck. We need to let him know, take your knee off my neck. Let him know that we can't breathe. If we don't tell him, he'll think it's all right to let us turn blue in the face. And so that's what we need to do. I've heard from everyone, educate our people. We need to figure out how to educate. We all need to get involved. We all need to advocate for living wages because clearly our parents nowadays are working 2 and 3 jobs, can't be at home, but we have to go there and advocate for that, fight for that. Once we do that, we can see a brighter future because we'll see our kids being educated. We'll see those that don't want to go to school go and get these nice jobs that require only a certification. Those things can happen right now. It's going to take all of us, and the NAACP and the Deltas I know are ready, willing, and able. Thank you all. Good afternoon.
Thank you so much, Mr. McClanahan. We are fired up. We're ready to go. As the chair of our committee, Dr. Sheila Lewis, always tells us the time is now. And we must realize after having these discussions and every time we come around, the time is now. So we cannot wait. We can't wait till a month before election. We got to continue to do the work. So I want to say thank you. Thank you to our panel. Thank you for taking the time to join us. Thank you for all of our guests. And thank you so much for sharing your time and knowledge with us this evening. Special thanks again to our audience for joining us, to our president, Dr. Ernest Singleton, to my chair of this social action committee, Dr. Sheila Lewis, and my co-chair, Ms. Judy Bethley. To our chaplain, Ms. Sharon Sims, thank you so much. Our moderator, she's done a fantastic job. And I just have to add this little bit. I know your mama is smiling right now. So thank you so much, Sarah Whitley. You have done an amazing job tonight. Thank you. Again, a special thank you, Mr. Mike McClanahan. Continue prayers to Ms. McClanahan. I talked to her on yesterday, so I know that she's healing well. So continue prayers for her. We want to thank you again, all of the members of the Baton Rouge Sigma Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. Our sponsors this evening, the NAACP, 100 Black Men of Baton Rouge, Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. And lastly, all of our guests, our panel guests, again, Dr. Claire Norris, thank you. Judge Don Johnson, thank you again for participating. President Lannis, thank you so much. And also Representative Selders, thank you. And again, thank you to you, President McClanahan. We thank you so much. Also, our technology team diligently running the scene behind everything and keeping us flowing. Ms. Chandra Elsie and Tierra Lane, thank you so much for all of your help this evening and support. Lastly, we want to invite our audience to join us for our Own Your Power Women's Summit. That will be on April the 27th. It will be held on Saturday, April the 27th at the Marriott Hotel at 8 a.m. Okay, and so please join us, and please website at BatonRougeSigma.org for any additional info and to purchase tickets. Thank you. And I'll turn it over to our SORA president. Would you like to close us out?
Yes, thank you so much. Again, we just appreciate each of you all for joining us this evening for this very informative discussion. We do hope that you got something valuable out of it. We hope that this ignited you and is empowering you to move forward, to make sure that you are involved. There were a lot of links and contacts placed in the chat. Please make sure you reach out to our panelists this evening, as well as the resources that they place for you all to know about. We look forward to seeing you all in next month at the summit that will take place, as Michelle Dennis stated, at the Marriott Hotel on April 27th. We will place that link in the chat. I think I tried to do so and I placed it incorrectly, but we will get that in the chat. And oh, there it is. It's in the chat now. So please register for that very informative day of events that we will have coming up next month, and continue to subscribe to our Facebook page as well as our Instagram page, because we have so many activities that are coming up that we want you all to participate in to learn more about what is happening in our community and how you can continue to make that impact. Thank you to our panelists again, to Pamela Whitley and Sheila Lewis and the Social Action Team for this great discussion. You all have a great evening and make sure you complete the evaluation. Y'all have a great night. Thank you.